All right, welcome to the Socality Show, everybody. I am so excited for today's conversation. We have with us John Gasienica, who is an incredible person. He is, well, John, let you explain to the people who you are, and I'm so ready for this conversation, where you are, where you live, and kind of your credentials. And let's dive into this incredible conversation all about healing from anxiety.
Great. Yeah, my name is John Gasienica. I'm a social worker and therapist by trade. I work for the Pain Psychology Center. I also teach at the Pain Reprocessing Therapy Center, and I practice a special type of therapy called Pain Reprocessing Therapy.
Yeah, this has been a game changer for me. So I'm so excited to be talking to you because, you know, in the pre-call, I was able to share my story with you a little bit and how I've talked about it on my social pages and my blog, all about my personal journey with anxiety and how it manifested in me physically, causing physical pain, which was so confusing for me because I was having real pain. And I went through the doctor, I went through series of tests and months and months and months of excruciating abdomen pain that literally would not let go. Like it was relentless, like kept me up at night. I was bloating, I couldn't sleep. I stopped almost eating because I was afraid so much of what was causing the physical pain. And through a series of tests and all that, wanted to rule everything out. And which actually the test just actually increased my anxiety because you're getting tests and you're doing these very vulnerable things and you're thinking you're so nervous of the results. But it was actually my one of my cousins who came over to my house one day. I think he just wanted to check in, and he was sharing his own personal story with me about how he went through back pain, chronic back pain, and how he was reading some things. And one of the books was The Way Out, which I know you're connected with the author, Alan. And he connected us in this conversation. And that book, as I started to read it and go through it, was like, this is talking about things I've never talked about, you know, and it was eye-opening, it was empowering. And it was like, there's no way that my physical pain is connected to anxiety. Because I've had anxiety in the past. I've dealt with panic attacks and, you know, things like that. But this was a new manifestation. So for me, as soon as I felt the physical pain, it alerted my brain that this is something new. And so can you just talk to us about what exactly is PRT? What is pain reprocessing therapy?
Sure. Yeah. Pain reprocessing therapy. It's a set of psychological tools that's aimed to eliminate chronic pain, treat chronic pain, but more importantly, eliminate it. And it's really based in neuroscience from the last 10, 15 years that shows us that most instances of chronic pain actually are coming from neurological pathways in the brain and not the physical body. And this is just like, it's a shocking thing for everybody to hear. And it can be a tricky message to give because the problem with neuropathic pain is that it's going to feel exactly like regular pain feels. So if you have an injury, 4 or 5 months after the injury, that pain will feel exactly the same as it did when you had the injury. The only difference now is that there's a piece of your brain that's activating it rather than being triggered by the nerve endings in your body.
Right. So which is such a eye-opening revelation because I was having physical pain in my abdomen. And so right away, my brain says to me, something is wrong with me physically, which I assume most people go down that path. Like I've got pain in my back, in my neck, or wherever it may be. How do you differentiate the difference between physical, like actual physical pain, and is it physical pain and neuroplastic pain? And can you explain neuroplastic pain?
Totally. I think it's helpful to kind of just start from the beginning of what we know about the research of pain. And what
Sure.
the research tells us is pain's our body's alarm bell. And so, I had this fallacy when I got into this that, the nerves in my hand cause pain when I touch a hot stove.
Mm.
What's actually happening is when I touch a hot stove, the nerves in my hand send information to my brain that say, hey, the temperature's going up here. And then my brain makes a decision based on my past experiences, whether or not to ring that alarm bell of pain and warn me, hey, you're in danger here. You got to take your hand away. And so neuropathic pain happens when the brain is getting signals from the body that are completely neutral, that are saying, we're okay. And the brain is activating the alarm bell. It's making a mistake. It's making a misinterpretation. So when you ask the question of, how do you know if you have neuroplastic pain? It's not going to be necessarily in the feeling of it because the brain uses the same alarm bell, whether it's getting signals of alarm or whether it's misinterpreting neutral signals. There are some things you can do, though, to check about the consistency of the pain. We know with physical injuries, if you have a broken arm, it's going to hurt every day. It's going to hurt every second exactly the same.
That's not neuroplastic. It's broken.
That's not neuroplastic. It's broken.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you have neuroplastic pain, sometimes there's inconsistencies. Sometimes your pain feels a 2 out of 10 as opposed to an 8 out of 10.
Right.
Sometimes there's certain circumstances that make your pain worse. Sometimes you have psychological triggers for your pain. Maybe you go around your boss and your back flares up.
Right.
Maybe when it's the weekend, it's Saturday, your back feels a lot better. So there's certain ways. We have about a list of 8 or 9 ways the doctors on our medical board have really kind of sussed out who has neuropathic pain and who doesn't. But those are just some of the examples.
Right. So how much, now I know in the book, The Way Out, it said 95% of pain is neuroplastic. Is that an accurate statistic?
Yeah, so it's really only been in the last 5 years that they've been ruling in and out neuroplastic pain in research, and it's in the 85 to 95% range. And the studies are very, very conservative. They want to make sure that they really aren't putting somebody who's in structurally caused pain in harm's way. And even when they take the most conservative estimates, 85 to 95% of chronic pain is neuroplastic.
Right. And so for me, I'm 45 years old. This was revelation to me. This, I got this book, I start listening to it, and then of course I go down a rabbit trail of like research, and I start finding more evidence of it. I find some courses about retraining the brain, the nervous system, all this stuff. How come this is not common knowledge? Like people run to the doctor, they want to find answers. How come this isn't being communicated, or how come people don't know about this kind of pain and this kind of therapy to find the way out?
There's a couple answers for this. One is that any big frame shift in the medical community is going to take years to do.
Right.
Because you have doctors who learned their medical degrees 10, 20, 30 years ago, and this is new information.
Right.
Secondly, the psychological community has not done a really good job with treating chronic pain. For years, it's been the CBT, it's been the mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Right.
If you look at meta-analyses of what those modalities do to chronic pain, they're great at decreasing anxiety around pain. They're good at decreasing depression around pain. But actually changing the amount of pain somebody's feeling, they do a very poor job of.
Right.
So people are understandably skeptical about a psychological modality coming along because it's like, hey, for decades now, you guys haven't been doing such a good job, and that's it's a totally fair complaint.
Yeah. So with this kind of pain reprocessing therapy, so lots of people experience this. So people listening right now that go, oh man, I've had pain in my back for years. How can they be confident and understand that is neuroplastic pain? Or do they go, I guess what I'm asking is, what are the cycles or what are the steps someone needs to take to measure their pain or get an answer to identify, okay, this is coming from anxiety, or this is coming from my brain? Like, how do you rule out that there is actually something physically wrong with you?
So there are doctors who make these rule outs that you can see. And if you want to go that route, that's absolutely appropriate.
Right.
There are ways to self-diagnose whether it's neuroplastic or not. Obviously, you always want to go to a medical doctor to get this diagnosis.
Right.
The good thing with PRT is that it's riskless. So even if you start trying the meditation, start trying some of the tools, you're not taking any risk, and a lot of times you'll find when you try the tools, all of a sudden your pain's decreasing.
Right.
And it's a really, really good sign that your pain is neuroplastic.
Right.
But just to go over a couple of the things we look for, as I said before, triggered by stress, triggered by external stimuli. A lot of times with clients of mine, I'll even have them close their eyes. Let's say they have a back pain every time they bend over. Mm-hmm. You can have somebody close their eyes and just imagine bending over. If they feel a significant anxiety response, or if their back pain kicks on just by the imagination of bending over, we know that there's something neurologically going on here.
Right.
The thing I want to be very clear with is I'm not saying people are making this pain up. It's the one thing we are absolutely clear of. This is not all in your head. This is not being made up. This is not weakness.
Right.
This is largely an unconscious neurological issue that can luckily be treated by psychological tools, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because for me, like, I can only connect it to my personal experience. So in January, I started feeling this pain in my abdomen. Why did it go to my abdomen? Like, why? Like, is there an answer to that? Is there a reason why? And why was it so relentless? Like, it was 24/7. Like, I couldn't even, it hurt to drive, sitting down. Like, is there a reason why it went there? Is there a reason why it goes to the back? Is there a reason why? Is there any reasoning for this?
There's a lot of clinicians who like to play a psychological game of like, why is it in the stomach? There has to be
Yeah.
something from your childhood.
Yeah.
I don't find maybe we will find some correlation later in time. I don't find it necessary to realize why the body part was affected. What you dealt with is the pain fear cycle. And
Mm,
typically when you're under a situation with stress, and it doesn't have to be big T trauma, it could be little persistent stress,
right.
your brain gets on high alert.
Okay.
And it's like a night watchman who's been told that there's going to be a robbery. Everything that moves, they shine the flashlight on.
Right.
So all of a sudden, your brain makes a little misinterpretation. It's jumpy, as if you've almost watched a horror movie and a plate shifts in your cabinet and you kind of jump.
Right.
It makes a misinterpretation of something safe and totally benign coming from your stomach, and it initiates the alarm bell of pain that says, hey, Scott, watch out. Be careful here. There's something going on.
Right.
Because you're under stress, this pain gets a little sticky in your brain. Oh, what is this, right? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Causes a little bit more fear in the system, which makes the brain even more likely to make misinterpretations. So the pain persists, and now it's 4 or 5 days of pain, and you have no idea what it is.
Right.
Now you're really on high alert, right?
This is exactly what happened.
Ruminations pick up. Am I going to be okay? Is this cancer? What's going on?
100%. Yeah.
Fear floods the brain, and it makes it more likely that the brain's jumpy, makes misinterpretations. And not only does the pain persist, but the pain can get worse because the brain's now escalating this alarm bell and saying, hey, we really got to take care of something, even though it's physiologically nothing's going on with you.
Right. This is exactly what happened to me. Like, I started feeling the pain and it kind of intensified. Then obviously I get on high alert. I start going to Dr. Google, which, and of course Dr. Google's going to give you everything. I think the thing is, in about 2 weeks in, it was so intense. And I remember just crying because it was such an intense pain. And I was shocked when I first went to the doctor because they did a blood work and they're like, your blood work is perfect, which left me encouraged, but at the same time discouraged because until I heard about the way out and all this training, it was like, this can't be. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, this is physical pain. And that's what left me even more confused until I learned about pain reprocessing therapy. I was just so confused, and then it leads me to my family doctor, because I went to the ER because I was in such pain, like just crying, and then family doctor. And of course, you're getting these tests and waiting for results, and you're just in your brain, you're like, it's this. It's got to be this. Like, I've never had this kind of pain in my life. And then when I understood that it was, like you said, the pain fear cycle, because then obviously every time I felt the sensation, which was constant, it just reiterated my fear. It just kind of empowered that fear, like something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong. And so for me, when I started reading the book and listening to the kind of teaching from what you guys teach, it was kind of, I had to almost accept the fact that this was coming from anxiety, and that was going to be, for me, I can't remember if this was in the book or not, but I think I'm confident it was. I called it an evidence sheet. I can't remember what you guys call it, where I started writing down the good things. Okay, scan came back normal. Blood work is good. Even the fact of the physio saying there's tightness, I would write that down. That's affirming. And I started to repeat those things to myself on the daily basis. That helped me get better. And one thing, I had lost weight because I wasn't eating, because I was nervous about maybe it's something else. But then as I started really seeing some movement, I started eating again and I started gaining weight. And I would say to myself, sick people don't gain weight, sick people, even and then my symptoms were improving. I'm like, sick people don't get better. And I started, and then every time I'd feel the pain, I'd be like, I renamed it as a sensation, versus pain. But then I would start speaking those things to myself, and I found that over a couple, even just weeks of saying those things to myself on the daily basis, even when I'd feel the pain, no, sick people don't get better. Sick people don't gain weight. It helped me start to overcome and almost retrain my brain. Is this something that is the right practice, like building an evidence sheet? Like, how do people journal? What are some practices that people can start putting into practice to start retraining their brain?
Absolutely. I mean, what you were doing is spot on. And I really like how you pointed out, like, you weren't totally bought in from the start. I haven't dealt with one client who was bought into this idea at the start. And it kind of just has to go like a snowball running down a hill where it starts to build. All of a sudden, one day you feel a little bit better and you say, oh my gosh, this might be working. Yeah. And then you get a little bit more hope. The fear drains from your system and your brain's less likely to make mistakes. Yeah. So that positive type of cognition work you were doing is fantastic.
Right.
Sick people don't gain weight, right? Sick people
Right.
don't get better.
Right.
These are messages of safety to your brain that are decreasing the fear. What we
Mm-hmm.
know, we did a study with the University of Colorado Boulder. We put people into fMRI machines before and after PRT treatment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what they found was that there are certain parts of the brain that react to pain and react to noxious stimuli that decreased in reactivity after PRT training.
Mm-hmm.
Put in a very, very simple, not obnoxious academic way, your brain reacts less to stimuli when it
Right.
doesn't feel so much fear.
Right.
So when you're telling yourself, I'm okay, I'm going to be
Right.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
there's literally parts of your brain that are lighting up less and less. Even if we were to touch your hand with a cold compress or a hot probe, those pieces of your brain are getting less activity. It's taking less
Right.
notice to the danger in your environment.
Right.
And this plays onto what we call predictive coding, which is a huge portion of what we experience in our reality is what our brain is predicting we should experience.
Mm.
And so if your brain is anticipating you feel pain each time you eat a certain food or each
Right.
time you bend over, there's going to be a significant part of your reality that's reflected in that. You're going to feel more pain. And so the way that this treatment usually works is people have very, very little hope and very little buy-in like you did.
Yeah.
And then it starts to grow and their brain actually starts to predict, oh, I can be okay. I can eat this food and be okay.
Yeah.
And this is happening on a very unconscious level.
Right.
I dealt with chronic shoulder pain for decades.
Really? Wow.
And it was, most of the people that work at the Pain Psychology Center had chronic pain and got over it. We drink the Kool-Aid and then we get really into it. But it was unfathomable for me to think of moving my shoulder in certain ways without
Right.
pain. And really all
Right.
that was happening was my brain was predicting every time I raised my arm above my shoulder,
Right.
it was dangerous. And that was all that
Right.
was going on.
And is this common? Like people, I've heard it's so incredible as I started talking about this to my friends. And even as I shared it on my social media page, the amount of DMs I got, and well, I'm going through this tour. This is eye-opening information. People go on this journey of like, maybe it's gluten, maybe it's dairy, and do some people like remove those things, then almost trick their brain that ever since I stopped eating gluten, I'm better? But it's really just the brain sending a retraining message, but it was never gluten in the first place. It was just the idea that they thought it was something causing the pain. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a funny, we tested this at the University of Colorado, our methodology, and, people who went through the PRT, the treatment I use, 2/3 of them were pain-free after 8 weeks. These are people in chronic pain for 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
And 98% of people improved. It was incredible. It was great to get
Right.
medical evidence.
Yeah.
But one of the funny little parts of this study was that the open label placebo that was used in the control group was just a saline shot. And it wasn't a closed label. The doctor literally said, I'm going to inject you with salt water in your back. This is going to do nothing for you. And some of those patients got better and some of those patients' pain completely went away.
Wow.
And so a lot of this is unconscious where our brain, once it feels this, unconsciously to have a doctor touch you and just to put something in your body and somebody from the medical field, your brain says, okay, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
Sometimes that little unconscious message is enough to decrease the fear to where the brain stops making so many misinterpretations.
Right.
So it doesn't work for everybody, that placebo idea. But you'll see placebo effects in all different things. Like, people say I stopped eating gluten, or people say I stopped doing this. And if that's what gave their brain a sense of safety so that it stopped making misinterpretations, beautiful.
Right.
But for the people that it doesn't work for, there's ways that you can give your brain those messages of safety on a
Right.
conscious level.
Right. And what are some things that people do that keep them locked into the state of this neuroplastic pain? Like, I know there's good habits, bad habits. What are some of the bad habits that people allow themselves to stay in that keeps them trapped in this pain?
I use the term fear a lot, and it's really an umbrella term for a lot of emotions that cause your brain to sense danger. Mm-hmm. And so stress can be fear-inducing for the brain, constant stress. Rumination can be incredibly fear-inducing. When you're in chronic pain, you might be on the computer all day long, looking at message boards. How do I get out of this? You might be looking at, the Google search results that say, whatever you have, it doesn't get better. You can't get better from this.
Right.
And so that's one side of it, the rumination. The other side of it is the emotional response to pain. And if every time you feel pain, you feel this tremendous amount of anger or frustration or sadness, which is totally normal to feel when we're in pain, but there's not work that goes into decreasing those emotions or processing those emotions are just sending more danger signals to your brain that says this is legitimate, this is really bad. And it's one of the harder things for people to break, because I totally understand when your back hurts and you've got to take your kids to school or you got to go to work. It's so natural to feel so annoyed and so angry and so despondent about what's going to happen to you. And that's where some of the tools in PRT come in. What can you do in those moments to actually give your brain a flood of safety, give your brain the safety that it needs in that moment to actually turn off these pain signals?
And what are some of those examples to turn them off?
It's really, it comes down to how you're reacting to the pain. It's 80% of the journey. When your pain comes on, the cycle people get stuck in is that it's a stimulating effect, right? Evolutionarily, we're predisposed to take our pain very seriously and think that we're in danger. That's how we survive. If we didn't, there's rare conditions where people don't feel pain and their life spans are very short because they don't survive, because we need pain to remind us if we're getting hurt. Right. So we have this biological predisposition to react to our pain seriously with emotion, with cognition, with problem solving. What our tools aim to do is that when your pain does come up, you actually help soothe your system. You get into a place where you're experiencing your pain alongside a feeling of relaxation, alongside a feeling of, I'm watching this pain the same way I'd watch a television rerun.
Right.
It's not really affecting me. I don't have much of an emotional response. And what you're doing is you're teaching your brain that when it feels some sort of stimuli, not to react so strongly to it. And over time, what starts to happen is the brain starts to fear that sensation less and less.
Right. Yeah, this happened to me because for me, obviously I was feeling this pain, and I actually spent a couple of days just laying in bed because it hurt to sit. And so I put myself in a position that was most comfortable, and that was laying down. And I remember just feeling so discouraged because of I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to get up and go. I had meetings. I had some amazing trips coming up, and I was so nervous. I'm not going to be able to go on my trips. I can't even stand up. I can't even walk around. I can't sit on a plane. And I just remember Googling an article that said just get out of bed and just start doing the things that bring good endorphins. So I'm force myself to go for coffee, and I'm sitting there in pain, having coffee with a friend, or I'm going to the gym and I'm just doing some light stretching. But just as I started to do things versus just deciding to lay in bed, I noticed over time my body started to respond better. It's I'm just trying to inject my mind with things that made me happy, release good endorphins. And although some of those things were painful, over time, as I consistently did them and started showing up, I noticed some of the pain start to go away. And then obviously I was at my doctor and I said, I got these trips coming up. He's like, go on the trips, because often people get better when they're not thinking about. So I went on the trips, and I noticed that even though I had some pain, there were moments that I'd be sitting and talking to friends. I'd be like, I don't feel the pain, and then I'd feel the pain because I started thinking about not feeling the pain. But as I started doing things that got my mind off the pain and those things that were holding me back, I started to notice with the retraining therapy, I'm starting to notice that I'm getting better. Yeah, I had it today, but I didn't have it all the time. Or I was able to sit down and enjoy a meal and not think about the pain. And so as I was starting to do those things, and I agree with you about when you've got, just get on with life and start acknowledging the sensation, but don't let it hold you back. It was when I started doing those things again, not focusing on it, that I did start to notice a bit of a change, that it started to decrease.
I mean, your instincts were spot on. What you were doing is what we'd call in the psychological field gradual exposure, gradually getting back into life. And I, tell my patients all the time, the sense of empowerment you're going to get from this exposure is going to be incredible. But don't push it. We want to do, when we deal with exposure, we want to have corrective experiences rather than re-traumatizations. And so if you're in 8 out of 10 pain, stay in bed. But on the days where it's maybe a 5 or a 6 or a 4, you can use some of these PRT tools. You can get up. You can start, as you're saying, get those good feelings going again, get those good endorphins going again. and teach your brain that you're not so afraid of this. But it is helpful to be gradual. And I'm curious if you experience this in your recovery, is that it's never linear. I'd love it to be like week 1, it's down to a 7 out of 10. Week 2, it's a 5 out of 10. A lot of times you can go to a 2 out of 10 or no pain. And then the next week it'll be a 6 out of 10. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really frustrating to people. It's incredibly frustrating to me. But unfortunately, that's the name of the game. It's not linear at all.
Yeah, the setbacks, and I had them. Like I was saying to my friends and to my family, I'm 90% there. I'm not out of the woods, but I'm 90%. One morning I came down to my wife and like, I'm healed. I felt the best I ever felt. And an hour later I was in bed, and I'm like, oh, like I thought I was at the 100%. And then I was like in bed and I was just like so discouraged. But then once again, just being like, no, everything, looking at my evidence sheet, repeating that to myself and being like, I'm getting better. Like I have to look. I did feel better for a few days, or it's getting better. I'm sleeping. One thing was like, I can sleep on my side. Like, I slept better through the night. And then once again, I noticed the pain started to alleviate again. But I remember in the book them saying it wasn't so much a matter if there was a setback, it's how you deal with that. How are you responding to that? And then, so for me, 2 months ago, I would have been back to the ER. But totally. I was also learning, okay, there's nothing physically wrong with me. There is a pain. The pain is real, but it's just coming from my brain, retrain my brain. And so, like you said, almost not believing that this is true. But also another thing in my evidence sheet was like, it worked. I was talking about my friend in Australia who was chronic fatigue for 3 years. He was telling me that he realized he was holding himself in that state until he could accept the fact it was coming from his anxiety. And when he fully accepted that there was nothing physically wrong with him, it was then and only then he could move forward in his healing journey. And now he's back to fully living, free of chronic pain, free of chronic fatigue, back to living his life. And it was a real testimony to me that if it worked for him, it could work for me. So I was willing to give it a try. And I did see those results in my life, and it was so empowering for me. So, yeah.
That's incredible. And I'm so glad you had that guide as your friend, even in those moments of panic, to be able to tap into that and say, like, it worked for him. Like, I might be feeling despair and terror right now. And even in those moments, just using that little bit of belief in your friend
for sure
help decrease that fear, which is fantastic.
For sure. And so obviously people can experience it in different ways. For me, it was in my abdomen. Yeah, for example, I've got a friend, like she's always got pain in her wrists, but she's a florist. And so she's been back and forth to the doctor. Nothing's wrong. But to the point where that she's always running to the ER with her husband. And I gave them the book and I said, you got to read this book the way out, and this might be, do you think that someone like that could be experiencing pain in their wrist because she's a florist and her career is attached to using her wrist? Like, is that something how pain can be related to a part of a body because it's related to something that is your work and that in your mind that you have to sustain that because your livelihood is connected? Is that sometimes how our brain can store stress?
Absolutely. And it's pretty rare for those circumstances to be caused by something structural. But the problem is that it will feel like it is structural.
Right.
One of the great things with her is that, you said that she went to the doctors, they said there's nothing wrong.
Right.
Even when there is something wrong, our bodies are incredibly resilient. They heal. Most injuries heal within 3 months, and we don't need pain from them.
Right.
The way the research really started pushing people toward this is they started doing asymptomatic studies on people, which means they just take healthy people off the street, a couple thousand of them, they put them in an MRI and they say, what's going on in their body? And we used to think, oh gosh, these people are going to be structurally sound. Turns out not at all. The statistics will show us that, let's say you're an average 40-year-old, 97% of people in their 40s, you will find some sort of structural finding in an MRI. The meniscus tears, tendinitis, ligament tears. With the back, there's all these statistics and charts I give my clients. It's in the 60 percentile. Yeah. Even somebody like me in their mid-30s will have disc slippages. Will have, the doctors on our medical board call it the gray hairs of the back, disc slippages. So we have this evidence that there's all these people that actually do, work as florists and even have structural issues in their wrist but don't have pain.
Right.
And so the question always comes, well, what's the difference between that person and somebody who has pain constantly?
Mm.
More often than not, 85% of the time or higher, it's their brain has learned to make these misinterpretations, and it's just become a cycle.
Right.
It's hard to believe, and we were even laughing before the recording today. You were not into the book when it was first given to you. I thought this stuff was quackery when I first
Yeah.
heard about it. Everybody who hears about this, because it's a colossal shift in the way we view this stuff. The idea that you can actually have damage in your body and not have pain for the rest of your life is mind-blowing.
Right.
Luckily, we have these fMRI machines. We have these new studies, and
Right.
we have more and more people like your friend who are getting out of pain.
Yep.
So where you can point to that and be like, I can do it myself. But
That's it.
every day more people are getting out of pain, and it's going to get easier because more studies are coming out,
Yeah.
more success stories are coming out. But it is, the cutting edge. It is the start of this revolution that really started maybe 20 years ago.
Right. And for people listening, I talked about my anxiety and explained how that manifested in my body. Can you break down, like, what is anxiety? Why do we have anxiety? Like, what causes it? Where does it come from? And is it a good thing, a bad thing? Like, what is anxiety?
Just like pain, anxiety is a danger signal. It's letting us know that there's some sort of danger. Because we're these mammals with these powerful cognitive systems in our brain, a lot of times perceived danger is interpreted by our brain as actual danger, and we feel anxiety. They'll do studies. They did studies in the 60s on babies crawling over a perceived ledge. Their brains hadn't developed this system yet to warn them that they were approaching danger. So if you let a baby by itself crawl to a ledge, it'll crawl right off. It doesn't have this predictive mechanism in the brain to warn you, hey, you're approaching danger. As we grow up and we get hurt and we get experiences, we develop these predictions by our brain that certain circumstances are dangerous to us. And our brain has a tremendous amount of tools to warn us that we're in danger. Sometimes anxiety can just feel like a thought. Sometimes anxiety will be tightness in your chest or a pull in your throat. It could be a tingle in your skin. It could be exhaustion. All these are evolutionary ways we've developed our body to shut us down to avoid danger. And that's really what anxiety is.
And so the snowball effect of anxiety is when we actually start to believe the stories that anxiety is telling us. Is that how everything escalates?
It can, and I think one of the issues we have, especially in modern society, is we have this thing called experiential avoidance, which is we'll feel this warning of anxiety, and instead of dealing with it or dealing with the danger that our brain thinks we have, we'll just distract ourselves. And what that's doing is that it's teaching our brain, oh my gosh, this sensation of anxiety is dangerous. This person wouldn't be avoiding it if it was safe. And as we avoid it more and more, our brain gets even more reactive to even that little sensation of anxiety.
Right.
And it could increase.
Is that like, okay, so for that, what was the term again?
Experiential avoidance.
Is that something like you go on a plane, you feel turbulence, and so you think you're afraid of it, so you don't get on planes anymore? Is that similar to that?
Yeah, and the strategy for that would be an exposure therapy. It's teaching your brain, I can handle this situation, and actually desensitizing your brain to the fear.
Right.
Exposure therapy is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly underutilized because it takes a lot of work. The client needs to buy in. And a lot of therapists don't like to push their patients into situations that they're afraid of. Now, that's one model of anxiety. The other model, which you touched on before, is that we start believing our cognitions that we actually are in danger when we're not. And that's another row, but a lot of times it's a combination of both the thoughts and the fear of avoidance.
Yeah, I know that for me, when I really did identify that there was nothing physically wrong with me, although there was physical manifestation, that allowed me to then stop believing the fact that there's nothing actually wrong with me. I'm okay. I'm safe. It's just a sensation that my brain has sent, and for some reason it's stuck there, and I've got to retrain myself. One thing I learned about was the limbic loop. Can you tell our listeners more about the limbic loop and what that is?
Tell me about the limbic loop. What's your understanding of it? Because it's not something I'm totally familiar with.
Oh, so my understanding of the limbic loop was how my brain was just caught in the loop of something's wrong with me.
Gotcha.
And then that was the loop I was caught in is I feel a sensation, it's pain, I'm in danger, something's wrong with me. And that I was just caught in that mindset of the limbic loop. And for me to break that cycle was to literally say, understand there was a sensation that was being sent to my body and that I wasn't truly in danger. And we could break that cycle. I was able to free myself of this, fear that something was actually physically wrong with me.
Oh, that loop is so relatable. Even if it's not with pain, getting a song stuck in your head or ruminating about something.
Yeah, totally. And that was one thing that really freed me up. But one practice that, the book teaches is somatic tracking. Can you talk about what is that? Because I really had to wrap my brain around what that was. Can you just explain a little bit more about that practice?
Yeah, so somatic tracking it's really a form of exposure where you're exposing yourself to the sensation of pain. Most people in chronic pain want to avoid their pain. So you're actually bringing your awareness to the pain. And so that's the first step, is just simply the act of intentionally going towards your pain is teaching your brain, oh wait, I'm not afraid of this. This is not something to be feared. And then the second component with it is increasing your level of safety as you interact with your pain. And so what you'll notice if you've been in chronic pain for a long time, when you bring your awareness there, it'll be an incredibly stimulating event. Your fear signals will come on. You'll feel a tightness in your chest. You'll feel like this overwhelming sense like something bad's going to happen. And this is just the pattern that's been set up in your brain. When you feel pain, you also fear this wave of fear. So somatic tracking, the second component of it, is really decreasing that amount of fear you experience while you watch your pain. So the exposure component, I'm watching my pain, I'm not afraid of it. And then there's a series of techniques where we help regulate the fear signals that come up while you're watching your pain. And I know a client's getting better when they come, they'll be in pain, but they kind of have the feeling of I don't care. And that's what somatic tracking helps you create, this feeling of I have pain, but I don't care.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. One night, one morning I woke up and I just clicked in my brain, stop giving this so much power in your life. That thought hit me. And I was like, I'm better. I'm going to get better. The pain is real, but I'm going to get better. And when I stopped giving it so much power, I also felt a strength of overcoming, and the ability to move forward. So that landing on the I don't care, I think, is super important. For you obviously have clients coming to you. What are some of the longest times people have been in chronic pain? Because I know people listening right now going, this isn't for me. I've been in pain for 10 years, 8 years. What are some examples of some people that have come in longevity? And then what are some of the time frames that it's taken them to turn around and see actual decrease in pain or even eliminate it altogether?
Luckily, with the way the brain learns, it values information coming most recently higher than historical information. So I have people come in and they say, we treat people at the Pain Psychology Center who are in their 60s and 70s. They've been in chronic pain for 40, 50 years. There's this fear of if my brain has learned these patterns for 40, 50 years, it's going to take me forever to get out of it. In fact, sometimes those are the clients who have the easiest time getting out of pain. There's almost like an acceptance with their pain they have. They're not fighting it so much that it pops very quickly for them.
They've learned to live with it.
They've learned to live with it. So
the
amount of time you've spent in pain is completely irrelevant. In our Boulder back pain study, these people were in pain for at least 10 years. That was the average. This was a study that went through 8 sessions. So it was 4 weeks, 1 month of treatment. 2/3 of these people were out of pain after 8 weeks. Now, this was in a clinical setting. It was very shortened. They also got to see a doctor. So not everything's going to happen on that quick time frame. But I bring that number up to just share how quickly and powerful it can happen. It doesn't always happen that way, but it certainly is possible. And this is published, in medical journals. This is the actual, hard fact.
It is very much connected to how, at first I wasn't a believer, and then I started to I got to give this a try because I was so desperate and committed to getting better. And over time, I just started to, I think it was the tests, someone said, if all your tests come back clear, because we do want to encourage people, get your test.
Get your test,
Get your test. But if it comes back clear, then that symptom goes in the anxiety bucket. It's like if your scans are good, your blood work's good, everything's good, stop. For me, one of the practices that help me is stop Googling. Stop being like, I'm going to figure, doctor, you don't understand. It's you come like I'm telling the doctor, no, it's this. I was literally going to my doctor. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. And he's looking at me like, it's not this, Scott. It's not that. Like, and to finally accept there's nothing physically wrong with me. So anything I'm feeling, a headache or panic attack, or mainly for me, it was the pain in my abdomen, it goes in the anxiety bucket. And so I'm just going to place it there. And I'm going to go through my evidence sheet in my brain. I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm getting better. I can sleep on my side. Tick. I can eat food. Tick. I gained a pound. Tick. Because for me, I was losing weight because I was so afraid to eat. And then, of course, people were noticing, oh, you're losing weight, which just sent me into the fear cycle. It's like, I'm losing weight and people are acknowledging it. And, oh, my gosh, it's validating that fear, right? And so when I started to accept the fact that it was anxiety, put those practices into somatic tracking, acknowledging it, renaming it as a sensation, and then being like, you know what, it's okay. Starting to celebrate those small wins. And then I was moving towards I can live with this. I'm getting better. Yeah, the pain's there, but I know what it is now. It is anxiety. I'm gonna totally accept that it is. And then obviously the evidence stories of some other friends who saw success stories. And then obviously to now, I would say I'm 100%, but every now and then I'll talk about it, and I will feel it. But what's amazing now is when I do feel it, within a couple minutes, it's gone. I've been able to be like, nope, and I've identified it, and I can move forward. So I want to be a testimony that this works for people out there. And so for people that are listening that are just like, they're skeptics. They're just like, for some people out there, this is a new bombshell as it was to me. What are some practices or some resources that they can look to start putting in this information to start working towards their healing?
For the skeptics, you have every right to be skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Psychology has done a very, very bad job with chronic pain historically. So I understand your skepticism. I was a skeptic. Everybody I talked to was a skeptic. You don't have to believe this. Yeah. Just have a 5% openness to these concepts. Right. And then, the resources to help yourself. I personally think the best, I'm a little biased because Alan's, a coworker of mine, a friend of mine. But the book, The Way Out, is an unbelievable, easily digestible resource to teach you not only the concepts and the facts behind the neuro research, but really, really easy steps to get you out of pain. That gives you the tools that you need when you're struggling. Mm-hmm. It's a great book. The podcast, Tell Me About Your Pain's fantastic. If you need to hear recordings of actual sessions of clinicians like myself doing PRT with people and hearing how it works, it's a great resource. And there's a ton of free resources out there. If you go to the Pain Psychology Center website, painpsychologycenter.com, or even if you're a clinician wanting to get trained in this, Pain Reprocessing Therapy Center, there's plenty of free resources out there where you don't have to buy a book. And I think the best doctor in this field is Dr. Howard Schubner. I'm a social worker. I'm a therapist. A lot of people will say, I want to hear my medical facts from a medical doctor. Beautiful. I was the same way. Go Google Dr. Howard Schubner. He gives plenty of talks. His talk to the Google campus was incredible about chronic pain. So there's plenty out there.
Awesome. This has been such an enlightening conversation. I know for me, I'm passionate about passing on this information to people because to me, it was the answer I needed. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are experiencing chronic pain, anxiety, depression, and there's so much information. The Way Out is an incredible book. I want to encourage everybody to, go buy it, go get it on Audible, listen to it, however you want, consume this information. Obviously, check out the podcast. And John, we want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to download this information to us. You have been a great resource, and I really just hope that people find this answer and move towards their healing. So if you guys love this information, make sure to follow John and get more of this information. All those resources, we'll link them below. And if you are enjoying the Socality podcast, make sure you like and subscribe and continue on listening to this great information. We'll see you guys soon.